So we're going to do something a little different in today's PipeGen Live. Normally I have some guests, we do a panel, we do like interview style. Today's going to be very different. It's going to be more workshop style. So we're going to talk specifically about messaging. And the reason why I call this the unsexy reason why outbound doesn't work for you is a lot of the work that I do with either SDR teams or account executives, 80% of the work that I do right now is with outbound. So it's how do we get our AEs to self-source more pipeline and do some outbound to supplement what they get from SDRs and marketing. And with outbound SDRs, especially, it's how do we just get more meetings and improve the quality of those meetings? Everyone always wants to know about tactics related to cold calling and cold email. What's the best opener that I should use? How do I handle this particular objection? All of this kind of stuff. And what everyone really kind of forgets to focus on, that's going to be the focus of our session today, is what is the foundation of the messaging that drives the stuff that you put in your emails, drives the stuff that you put in your phone calls. I found that when we make changes to the messaging and do some of the stuff I'm going to share with you guys today, this is the type of thing that can get double-digit reply rates in your cold emails. This is the type of thing that can get you from a 10% conversion rate, let's say on a cold call, to a 25 or 30%. So we're going to dig in today. It's going to be pretty interactive. We're going to talk about why the focus on messaging, and we're going to dig in workshop style. I'm going to have a worksheet for you guys today, and today's session is going to be pretty interactive. One quick note, because everyone asks, yes, today's call is going to be recorded. And two, if you have questions, if you could either drop them into the chat or the Q&A section, I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. You guys ready to rock? Let me know in the chat. You ready to rock and roll? Ready to dig in? Get ready to get some shit done? Cool. Yes. Let's go. Okay. So, and actually kind of spoiled that. Hopefully you didn't see that last slide. These are value prop statements. I pulled these from some companies, from some technology that probably y'all are using. And I pulled these value prop statements from their LinkedIn profile pages. Okay. What do you guys notice about how these four companies talk about their solution? Could be good or bad. Could be stuff that you like. Could be stuff that you don't like. Yeah. It's all about themselves. Word vomit, we and our. Mark, who needs ASMR when you have value prop statements? Love it. Yeah, no insights, jargon. Yeah, buzzwords. And it's nothing against these. I'm fans of all four of these companies. It's nothing against these companies in particular. I'm big fans of all four of these companies. The thing that is really hard to distinguish as a prospect is if we use messaging like this, marketing style messaging, value prop style messaging, and we use this to give context to a prospect on a cold call, let's say, or a cold email to talk about what we do, they all look exactly the same. All four of them use the word platform. A couple of them talk about revenue platform, revenue intelligence platform. They all generally look the same. The bigger thing that I want to point out, though, is yes, they're all very buzzword laden and all that kind of stuff. They all talk about what the product does. They talk about what it does. It doesn't talk about, from the customer's perspective, the problem that it might solve for them or the goals that it might help them accomplish. It doesn't give any context for the customer. It talks all about what it does. The reason why this is super important to point out is that messaging, if you message like this and you talk about what your product or your solution does, it's going to blend in with all of the other noise out there. And it's also going to lead to success rates, or shall I say failure rates, that look a lot like what you see on the screen. The impact of bad messaging, and not to mention the impact, the emotional toll, it is not sustainable for you as a sales team, a sales org, or as a rep to have sub 1% reply rates, sub 2% success rates from cold calls. These are averages across the industry, by the way. And for you to have to reach out 12 to 15 plus times to every, like, this is not sustainable. especially like AI. I have a very, you know, hard stance on AI that I don't think AI is an extra brain yet. I think it's an extra set of hands. So in other words, don't expect AI to do a lot of stuff for you. Jason Lemkin over at SaaStr called it out. I share a very similar viewpoint to him. He said that AI is going to ruin outbound, and AI can do the stuff that you're seeing on the screen. AI can get a 1% reply rate. So this isn't sustainable. The culprit of this, in my experience, working with some of the largest, fastest growing software companies, especially out there, is that a lot of this, the root of it is messaging. So the key idea first is to your prospects, you look and sound like everyone else. Their perspective is the only one that matters. And you look and sound like everyone else when you communicate like that. The next point I want to make, so I got a little setup here for you guys. All right. I got some data. I want to kind of drill this point home, and then we'll get to the more tactical workshop part of this. If you give me like 5 or 10 minutes, the next part I want to dig into is messaging, but from a very practical standpoint of how we would think about it on a cold call. Let me know in the chat. There's quite a bit of data on this. What percentage of the cold call should you spend talking versus the prospect? So give me that percentage in the chat. What do you think? Loving the engagement so far, everyone. It's great seeing all this stuff in the chat. Yeah, we got everything from 20% to, 20%, 40%, 30, 70. Charles says 100%. Hopefully you're not talking 100% of the time. Yeah. Okay, drum roll. Here's what the data shows. Gong did a study of 90,380 cold calls. And what they found is that the successful cold calls, the rep talks 55% of the time compared to 45% prospect. In the unsuccessful cold calls, the rep talks about 42% of the time. It's very interesting, right? So I don't know about you guys. I was taught this idea that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them proportionately. Has anyone else taught that lesson, right? You should listen more than you talk. Yeah, a lot of you, it looks like. So the reason why I share this is that talk time is, for the most part, a vanity metric. It's not like, oh, if I talk less than the prospect, I will just be more successful. It's not like, it's much more intricate than that, which we'll talk about here in a second. But there's a misconception that you have to talk less than the prospect. Challenger, I don't know if anyone's read the latest book in the Challenger series, The Jolt Effect. What I think is the coolest part about this book is they were able to get data from millions of sales calls, because after COVID, everyone was doing virtual calls. So they were able to gather a ton of data through Zoom, Team, WebEx, etc. And they also found that during sales cycles, you guys, for closed won deals, the rep talked 58% of the time on average, and in deals they lost, they talked less as a percentage of talk time. So the key idea here, so if you think about the sales conversations included, the cold calls, etc., it's not about talking less as a percentage of talk time than the prospect. It's about talking about yourself less. So I'll let that kind of sink in, because this is like going to be the foundation across everything that we talk about today. It's not about talking less than the prospect. It's about talking about yourself less. So the content of the conversation is more important than how much time you spend talking. Okay? Yes, Manuel, you put it in the chat there. When you talk, it needs to be about the prospect's problem or assumed problem. So the objective, as we get into the exercises for today, we have 2 goals with messaging. 1 is to cut through the clutter, and 2 is to reduce skepticism. Skepticism, I believe, is your number 1 objection in sales. Sales is one of 3 professions that I can think of where you start from behind the starting line. I think being a lawyer is one of those, and I think being a politician is the other one. In sales, we start from a place of distrust with the prospect. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. We start from a place of distrust with a prospect. Think about it. The first time that a prospect picks up a cold call from you, even when they hop on a sales call, you guys, they're starting from a place of skepticism, because 90+% of the interactions they have with people like us are bad. It's not that all salespeople are bad necessarily. It's that a lot of the time it's just a waste of time. So our prospects have these invisible scripts of what they think it's like to interact with people like us. And a lot of times what that makes us do is feel like, oh, we have to have a really great pitch. No, the way that you earn trust and reduce skepticism is by showing them that you know their world. Okay. So let's dig into messaging. The goal of this today is to help you build some messaging that will reduce skepticism in these conversations, build credibility, and speak your buyer's language without pitching. Okay. So, first key strategy, we're going to start getting tactical here, is moving from what I call product voice to customer voice. I actually learned this from the folks over at Zoom Info. They talk about this a lot over at Zoom Info. And I thought this was like really great. I've incorporated into my trainings. So let me know in the chat if a prospect asked you, you can assume it's whatever persona that you want. If a prospect asked you on a cold call, who are you with? What do you guys do? Write into the chat. How would you respond to that question? So you're on a cold call. Prospect says, yeah, who are you with? What do you guys do? Write in the chat for me. How would you answer that question? Give you guys a couple seconds here. How would you answer that question? Yeah, we help customers with data wrangling. We help sales teams generate pipeline using accurate contact data and outreach solutions. We solve problems like yours. We make your clients choose you again. Yeah, just look, you guys, at what everyone's writing into the chat. This is where I want to push you guys a little bit, okay? Because this is a workshop. I'm treating all of you guys like your clients here. Where I'm going to start to push you a bit is everyone here is talking about what their solution does. Everyone here is talking about what the solution does, okay? And it's sounding a lot like this. This is actually fresh from a conversation I had with a prospect earlier this week who sells an EHS solution to directors of safety. I asked them this question and they said, yeah, if a prospect was like, hey, who are you with? What do you guys do? The way they would answer is, yeah, we provide an all-in-one compliance solution that digitizes your compliance program, helps keep your employees safe, and gives you real-time analytics into what's going on with inspections, audits, etc. There's nothing like inherently wrong with this answer, except for every one of your competitors could give that same exact answer. And when you explain something by getting super logical with what it does, think about the stuff that you remember that really sticks with you. I can remember sales training, you guys, that I went through in like 2008 or 2009. I don't really remember the concept that the person was teaching, but I remember the story. And I remember the lessons from the stories. What I want you guys to think about is how could you talk about what you do through the voice of the customer? So instead of saying we're an all-in-one compliance solution, what I was pushing this prospect and what I push my other clients to say is things like this. Hey, great question. I was actually speaking with a director of safety the other day, and one of the things they shared with me was this. They have multiple locations that they're in charge of. They're doing everything on physical documents that will oftentimes get misplaced. And they really wanted to improve safety across their locations, but they couldn't like really report, track, or train the team because everything was done on pen and paper. I'm curious, if at all, does that resonate with you? What do you guys notice the differences between product voice versus customer voice? Let me know in the chat. What do you guys notice about those two ways answering the same exact question? What do you guys notice about these two ways that you can answer the question? Yeah, problem proposition first. It tells a story. Yeah, genuine curiosity. You talked about problems, spotlighting a problem, not feature dumping. Ross asks, so instead of telling what the vendor does, you're telling what the customer who bought did and how it relates. Yes. Because you think about like the stuff that you buy, whether B2B or B2C, you buy it because you know that other people have used it to solve a similar challenge or to accomplish a specific thing that you also have. So there's safety in social proof. That's essentially what you're doing here, right? The customer voice on the right is I'm going to share a specific example of what I heard from a customer and see if it resonates. That's that creates a conversation. Here's what I hear and see amongst your peers. Does that resonate? That starts a conversation. Me pitching the product and talking about what it does and seeing if you're interested in a demo, that doesn't start a conversation. That's a yes or no answer. Are you interested in seeing a demo? Are you interested in seeing how our product could help you XYZ? That doesn't start a conversation. That is a conversation stopper, right? So for funsies, before we dig into how to come up with what you see on the right, I'd love for you guys to take a shot at this real quick. If you had to restate what you do, less in product voice and more around customer voice by sharing a specific persona, maybe, and a problem that they have that you solve, what would that sound like? I'll give you guys like a minute to do this. If you had to do something that was less in product voice and more in customer voice, and you edited and tweaked what you shared in the chat earlier, what would it sound like if it was more in customer voice? Drop it into the chat for me. And I know this will take a little bit. I'll give you guys like a minute here. If you had to talk about what you do and answer the question, who are you with? What do you guys do? And you did it more through customer voice instead of product voice, right into the chat for me, what would that sound like? What would that look like? You guys are doing great so far. I'm curious to see what some of you come up with. What would that sound like in customer voice? Taryn, I love where you're going with that, Taryn. What I see and hear from speaking to leaders like yourself is that traditional training usually involves boring click-through training just to pass the quiz. And what I would add there is maybe, and it doesn't really test the person's actual competence and how good they are at the thing. How does that resonate with you? Yeah. Tara, I love the imagery and what you dropped in there, Tara. Yeah, what we hear oftentimes is, hey, we're just swimming in data. Our systems don't really talk to each other, and it's really hard to take action on the stuff that we find in our data. How does that resonate? And again, I want you to be a little more specific, but that I love the imagery in what you said there. Yeah, I'm just looking through some of these. You guys are doing great so far. This is good stuff, you guys. So before we move on for a second, the point that I really want to drill home is whether it's a cold call or a discovery conversation or sales call or whatever it might be, what you want to think about is who's a recent customer or prospect that I've talked to that has had the problem that we solve? Like in their words, what did they say? What was the situation? Like you can literally borrow that same thing from your sales calls and plug it into the beginning of your cold call. And your cold call, you might open with a permission-based opener, let's say. That might be, hey, Michelle, it's Jason with Outbound Squad. I know I probably caught you in the middle of something. Do you have a minute for me to share the reason for my call? Yeah, sure. Well, hey, I speak with a lot of VPs of sales. And what I keep hearing right now is that's where you can share it. And if it was me, it would sound something like this. Yeah, I was working with a VP of sales the other day, big client engagement. And the number one thing that was on his mind was making a pivot from inbound to outbound led sales. So their organization is at a point where they really need to pivot, and in order to grow, especially their ASP, they need to go outbound, more direct into those accounts, and really rally the team around that approach. I'm curious, how, if at all, does that resonate with you? Right, so same kind of thing there. So I want to pause here real quick. You guys are doing great. I haven't even really given you a lot of tactical direction on how to pull this off, and a lot of you are already doing that from what I can see in the chat. So the first big flip that we need to make is less product voice, more customer voice. Talk less about what my solution does, and I'm going to talk more about first-person perspective from the customer. What problems our customers have? It feels more like I'm sharing an insight. Here's what we hear. How does that resonate versus here's what we do? Do you want to buy it? Okay. So let's talk tactically how to actually build some of this stuff. One of the folks that I want to highlight, Rod Baptista, who I'm friends with, he is really, really big on this. He was the fastest SDR to AE promotion at ZoomInfo and was the top SDR multiple years in a row at ZoomInfo, Borside. He's at another company I'm forgetting the name of now, but he's sourced over 1,000 meetings, and his key insight and what he credits most is using customer voice. He talks about priorities and problems first before they talk about the solution. So here's how we make this super tactical. I'm going to show you what I call a messaging matrix. This is literally the first thing that I do with a big client when I work with them. There's two things that you can do if you're a sales leader or an enablement leader on this call, and you want to roll this out to your team. One, you're going to assign an internal team. So what I will typically do, and what my best customers do, is they'll take their top 2 or 3 AEs, a few SDRs, a few of their best frontline leaders, and maybe an enablement person, so a group of less than 10. And those people will be in charge of outbound messaging. And then those same people will refresh the content that I'm about to show you once per quarter. So here's what the messaging matrix looks like. And let me know if you guys have questions on how to implement this maybe across your team or your organization. And I'm happy to share it with you. So I'm going to share this document with you guys in a second, but I want to show you what we're going to be building here. All right, here we go. Let me share this. And I'll walk you guys through what's on here. Okay, let me, there we go, clean this up a bit. All right, so this is for a customer, and there's a bunch of examples in here. There's a VP of Ops example, there's a HR example, there's a clinical ops example. What you're looking at here is a customer that's sold into K through 12 school districts. So part of their solution, they would sell to a director of curriculum and instruction. So think about it, a large school district, there's literally people that are in charge of the curriculum that gets taught and making sure the teachers, they're kind of like sales enablement, but for teachers. So I wanted to kind of break down some of these sections here that you see, highlight what's in here, and then we're going to start going through this directly. And you guys, I'm going to share this document with you. We're going to do one of these together as a group. So hopefully that you walk away with something that's maybe not fully completed, but you have a good framework. Let me know in the chat. You guys still alive? You still out there? We good? Everyone's still cool? Like I said, I'm by myself today, so I'm basically talking to a screen and a computer. So, okay, cool. Everyone's still alive. So what you see on the screen here, it's broken into a couple different categories. We have priorities, current solution, problem, aspirations, and then value prop. The priority statement, what we want to think of with the priority is these are the top things that a director of curriculum and instruction is thinking about right now. One of the biggest mistakes that we can make, especially when we're prospecting, but throughout the entire sales process, is we say, hey, we have this solution. Why don't you come over into our world and buy the solution? We try to make our solution a priority for them. What we need to do instead is say, hey, buyer, you have this list of priorities. and things that you want to accomplish this year, next, etc., how can we align our solution to something that you already care about? So if I can align with what they already care about, there's less friction there. So it's not about how do I bring them into my world to get them to care about my solution. No, it's how do I go in their world and show them that my solution will align with their priority or their problem. Okay. So the priorities, what's really clutch here is you need to really think about, and I'll talk about where to get this information too, is you really need to think about what's top of mind for these folks. So I have good versus bad examples in here, but for the directors of curriculum and instruction, unfinished learning is top of mind. So if you were to ask these people, a way to envision this is imagine if this webinar that has almost, I think, 250 people in it right now, imagine if 250 of your prospect was in here. And let's say that that's a director of curriculum and instruction, an HR leader, whatever it is. Like if you were to ask them, hey, what's top of mind for you guys right now? What are your priorities? You would probably see a lot of patterns and similarities across your buyers. So for these folks, it's unfinished learning, it's student engagement, it's teacher buy-in. The current solution is how do they get that job done right now? Why change is the problem, right? So what's bad about the current way that they do things? Why should they change? And then their aspirations. What's really cool about this, yeah, I can zoom in a little bit, is I'll give you another example. This one's a little more simple. It's another client that I worked with that sold into clinical operations. So they sold a solution that, imagine if you sell a medical device that lowers someone's blood pressure. What will help that medical device sell better is if you run it through a study and prove through the study that it actually does deliver on that result. It does indeed lower your blood pressure. So with these clinical operations people, these are the people in charge at those companies of running those studies. The two things that they care about are starting studies and then making sure the studies that they start finish on time. How do they do it right now? Probably manually through a spreadsheet, or they use some sort of competing tool, and then there's the problems, et cetera. What's really badass about this is you can take this messaging matrix and you can plug it right into a cold call talk track. The starting studies and finishing studies on time, like this is literally the language that you're going to use at the beginning of your cold call. I talk with people like you and they share that these two things are top of mind. Like if you want to really nail the first 60 seconds of your cold call, that language right there, you nail that, that's going to nail the call. The middle part, these are the problems. We're basically rephrasing problems into questions in the middle part of the call. Pretty cool, right? For emails, plugs right in. There's the personalization of the email. I noticed this. That's the priority. People like you tell us they want to do this thing, but they run into this problem. Here's how we helped another client. Could this be helpful for you? So this messaging, you guys can see you can plug and play it into talk tracks and emails pretty seamlessly, and it's going to give you really, really, really good copy. All right. So what I want to do, we're going to start making this actionable for you guys. So I'm going to drop this into the chat. It's going to prompt you to make a copy of this document. So go ahead and make a copy of the document. And when you're ready to go, put ready into the chat or G to G that you're good to go. So make a copy of that document. And then let me know when you're good to go. And what I'll do too, if there's anyone that is not able to access the Google Doc because maybe you're an Outlook shop, let me actually drag this to my desktop. Let me share the actual Word doc too. Yeah, I'm going to attach it here. Give me just a second, you guys. All right, you may need to, I'll give you guys like another 30 seconds or so. You might need to refresh your computer, that link, so that you can grab it. And let me see if I can share it another way here too. Give me just a second. It's not letting me actually upload the document directly. All right, give me just a second, you guys. I'm going to share another link. I just made a copy of this document. If you're having trouble accessing that first one, try this new link. I'll drop this into the chat. All right, cool. Let me know, for those of you that first link didn't work, let me know if it's good to go in the chat now. And if not, I'll send this out afterwards and you'll just have to kind of roll with me here. I'll give you guys another few seconds here. Okay, so Kayla, sorry, I don't know why the link is not working. We'll send something out afterwards so that you can grab it. For some reason, it's not letting me attach a Word doc file, which is what I would normally do in this instance. So let me do this, actually. Let's try one more thing. A Word doc. Okay, you can also try downloading here. Yeah, sorry, this is a good problem to have, obviously. There's too many people trying to access it at one time. Okay, let's keep going. I want to be mindful of time here. Make sure that we have enough time to dig through this. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to walk you guys through each of these sections, okay? The first thing that we're going to do is come up with priorities, okay? So what's top of mind for me right now? What are my peers thinking? We're going to go through this in sections, and I'm going to have you guys drop examples of this stuff into the chat. So what's really cool about this document is it actually outlines in written form how to come up with each section of this document, okay? So the first thing I want to come up with is the priority. There's a specific formula that I like to use. It's headline and then outcome plus problem. So basically the way that we want to populate this formula that's on my screen is the headline is think about what is top of mind for your prospects' peers. So imagine that this Zoom call, this webinar is filled with your prospects. And we ask them, what's top of mind for you? What trends are you worried about or focused on? What do we, what do you want our help with, et cetera? This is usually a 1 to 5 word statement at the beginning. So earlier I talked about directors of curriculum and instruction. Their headline was unfinished learning. That's the ear grabber. That's the attention grabber for them. HR, skill gaps in staffing, reducing admin work, starting studies, right? So that's the headline. The outcome plus the problem is what are they trying to do? And what is the problem they are trying to fix? Okay. So with the director of curriculum and instruction, again, it was unfinished learning. How do we think that we want to accomplish, structure and focus our curriculum to reach learning targets and improve test scores? 2, problem, address low graduation rates. How do we quickly enroll participants to get our product to market and avoid delays in the timeline? This is an age-old copywriting formula that came about from marketers way back in the day of, I want to do this thing, but not experience this problem. I'd love for you guys to take a crack at this in the chat. You can drop 1 or 2 priority statements for your specific persona that follow this like headline, outcome, avoid problem. This is on page 5 of the document, by the way. So headline is literally in a cold call, I'm going to say, hey, one of the things that we're hearing a theme around is unfinished learning. How do we structure and focus our curriculum to reach learning targets and improve test scores to address low graduation rates? Starting studies. How do we quickly enroll participants to get our product to market and avoid delays in the timeline? So I'd love for you guys to take a crack at this, come up with a priority statement or 2, and then drop it into the chat. So Victoria, where I would push you with yours, you said reduce time sourcing influencers for campaigns plus better campaign reporting. Flip better campaign reporting into a problem. Like, what's the problem that better campaign reporting solves? I'll give you guys some time to do this. And this, again, the purpose of today is that we're going to do this workshop style so that you leave the call today with something tangible, hopefully, that you can use. Let me know in the chat. Come up with 1 priority statement following this formula. Yeah, Victoria, that's great. So you need a headline there. So once you have the headline, it would be, yeah, how do we reduce time it takes for us to source influencers for our campaigns so that we can identify gaps in our influencer strategy? Oh, Graham, killer, dude. Financial illness. How do we help lower wage employees who are financially struggling to reduce turnover, absenteeism, and safety incidents? Dude, that's freaking money, man. I love that. Yeah, Pavani, reduce permit turnaround time. How do we get our customers to submit good permit applications without without hours, excuse me, of back and forth email and phone conversations? Yeah, Will, leaders in the weeds. How do we elevate our leaders' work into the area strategy and out of tactics to focus them on bigger business problems? Yeah, Charles. I love how specific Charles yours is, Charles Radcliffe. Lost RFPs. How do we spend more time on winning business and building customer relationships without losing tenders because we didn't turn them around on time? Dude, that's so good. I love that. So Tara Schultz, where I would upgrade yours just a bit, it says college dropouts. It's a good headline. How do we remove barriers to graduation? That feels more like the problem. That feels like the part in red here. I think you need an outcome piece in the middle, and it could be something like, yeah, we're hearing a big theme around college dropouts. How do we improve retention rates and remove barriers to graduation? Something like that. Yeah, Manuel. Billing and collections. How do we get our customers to pay us on time and avoid having to manually enter that data once we get paid? Love it. Let me know in the chat or in the Q&A if anyone's stuck on a concept and not really picking up what we're putting down. Let me know that in the chat or in the Q&A section. All right, I'm going to give you guys one more minute and then we're going to keep moving because I want to go through at least a full section of this while we go, okay? You guys are killing it so far. Yeah, cool. You guys are crushing it here. Okay, we're going to keep moving. All right. So, we have the priority statement. And ideally, you have two or three priorities, tops three. So we're just working on one of them today, but ideally you have two or three. There's generally a couple different priorities that a prospect would have that your solution can help solve a problem for. Now what we're going to do is the current solution and the problem. So the current solution, we're going to do these two things together here, okay? The current solution, let me show you another example. So this was with a company I sold to, or I worked with that sells into HR, and they had like an on-demand, um, how would you describe it? It's like on-demand talent that people could access through a platform. So imagine like you've run a manufacturing plant or a warehouse like Amazon, and you want to hire seasonal workers. They basically have a platform where you can just hire seasonal workers through the platform. So they're vetted, all of that kind of stuff. You don't have to work through a hiring agency, which can be super expensive, and the quality can be really, kind of bad as well. So one of their priorities was speed and cost of hiring. How do we improve our hiring practices to increase the speed of hiring and lower the cost of acquisition? The two ways that the prospect is getting the job done right now is one, they either work with an outside firm, or two, they have an in-house recruiting team. For one, if they're working with an outside recruiting firm, the problem is that the cost is high, candidate quality is poor, and the timeline to hire can be too long. If they're doing it in-house, it can be very labor intensive and candidates are not responding to job ads. So what I want you guys to do now, I want you to think about, and let's just pick one way for this example. Pick one way that the prospect is getting the job done. If they are not using your solution, how else might they be getting the job done? Solution doesn't necessarily mean technology. So if you sell software in this call, like many of you do, it doesn't have to be a competing software. So it could be a people thing. So maybe that they do it really manually with a lot more people. So instead of using a software solution, they have people do the thing. Is it a process thing? Is the process pen and paper maybe versus software? Technology, are they using a competing software vendor, et cetera? The problem that you want to anchor to that is you want to think about how is that current solution getting in the way of the priority? And really where you want to get to is impact, the so what. So I want to give you guys more examples, okay? So if we use the director of curriculum and instruction again, unfinished learning is the priority. If they're not using my customer solution, they're using an assessment solution or state tests. Those have inconsistent data and it makes them reactive instead of proactive. With VP of Ops, we want to maximize efficiency in our warehouse through automation and reduce costs while increasing quality. We might be doing manual welding, or maybe we're using something sophisticated and automated. If it's manual, it's inefficient and it's really costly and it creates product issues. If we're trying to automate it, we're relying on full-time software developers and people to like customize the automation for us, and we could run behind. You guys get what I'm doing here? So you're going to take the priority. Now what I want you to do is think about how are they currently getting the job done? What's a current solution? And then tag a problem to that. So in the chat, what you could drop in is the current solution that they're using, and then add another sentence or two at the end of that with why that current solution isn't ideal. That's the problem. The problem is if I'm using this current solution, how does it make it harder for me to achieve the priority? So I'll give you guys a minute or two for that. Think about what's the current solution. What is the current solution? What is the problem with that? This becomes the problem-based language that you're going to use in your sales calls, your cold calls, your cold emails, etc. Drop it into the chat for me. Yeah, Brittany says manual process, manual logging, communications, and reactions are time-consuming, inconsistent, and runs the risk of missed. Perfect. So Brittany, since you got done early, what you could do is think about what's the next priority. Is there a second priority maybe that I could come up with and fill out in this messaging matrix, and then a current solution and problem for that? What you could also do, Brittany, is there another current solution they might be using? So there's oftentimes multiple current solutions in ways that they get the job done. You could tackle the next one if you get done early. Mark, hey, Mark. What if their current solution is working, but you have a solution that would complement what they're doing? Yeah, so you still need to flip it into a problem, though. So the current solution could be, hey, yeah, we are using this piece of software that helps us reduce manual tasks. The problem is, what is it not doing that your solution can also help it do? So you got to flip that into a problem. Stuff, you guys. I'm just looking through what you guys are dropping in the chat here. Everything's looking really good so far. Manuel, that's a really good one, dude. You're crushing it today, Manuel. Really good stuff. Yeah, Tara, love yours. Yeah, waiting for academic alerts, which lags 4 to 6 weeks into the semester. This is often weeks too late to identify and interview with students who are in danger of dropping out. So, Tara, like the last thing that I would add to that, and this is advice for everyone, um, think about how you can make the implicit explicit. So, what I would tag on the end of that, this is often weeks too late to identify and intervene with students who are in danger of dropping out. So the real problem, the root cause, like to make that very explicit, is that dropout rates will increase. That's the problem. So if they are using that current solution, dropout rates will increase. They will be higher because of that. That is that's the thing, the person you're reaching out to, which sounds like someone probably in some sort of admissions role, like that's the thing that they're going to care about. Cool. I'm going to keep looking here. Hey, Lori. Yeah, clinicians have to manually track on spreadsheets and calendar when to contact the patient. This creates inefficiency and the potential loss of revenue opportunities. So, Lori, I would get very explicit with that too. How can you make the implicit explicit there? Is the missed revenue opportunity that because we're not tracking them, um, we're not capturing revenue from repeat visits? Is it that it affects readmission rates, which I know can drive up cost? So, like, get really specific. What are those revenue opportunities that are lost? Megan, great. Yeah, so Daniela, what I would do is let's not phrase it into questions quite yet. So it said you're probably using text expander to automate text, but what if you could use a solution that is tailored to lawyers? So to frame this into a problem, I would say, hey, if you're using these competing solutions, they're not tailored to lawyers. Therefore, like some of the things I feel like lawyers would need is like stuff that can help them, like that they could bill or that they could track, per hour, or that meets some sort of compliance standard. So I would think about those things in the statement. Like if I'm not using something that's built and tailored for lawyers, it may not be compliant, which puts me at risk. It doesn't allow me to do my job in a way where I can actually charge a billable hour for it. Right. So I might be missing out on revenue. I'm just guessing, Daniela, at what that is. So let me know in the chat if I'm warm-ish on that. So that's the current solution plus problem. I'm going to keep moving, you guys. You're doing great. I noticed there is a lot of like really good progress that I've seen from priorities to current solutions to problems. The aspirations, this is sort of the easiest part. With aspirations, what I would want to think about is what is the desired future state in 6+ months? What is the outcome that I want? Ideally, it's something that you could measure. With this VP of Ops, it was, hey, to keep up with demand while keeping costs down, make higher profits and grow the business. With this VP of HR, improve our hiring process so that we never run into a labor bottleneck again. Clinical Ops, start our studies ahead of schedule so we can get our product to market faster. Right? So think about the aspiration. I'll scroll up one more time. This is the desired future state. Super simple. What outcome will your solution provide to them? Align that outcome with what they want to accomplish. And then I have one more thing that I want to show you guys. So drop it into the chat for me. I'll give you like maybe 90 seconds or so. What is the outcome that your prospect wants in that priority bucket? Let me know in the chat. I would love to see a few more examples. I got some other exercises and stuff for you to do. And if you got questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A button in the Q&A section. Yes, Larry, we'll send you a recording. Send everyone a recording after this. Yeah, someone asked about how to find their priorities. I'll show you guys that here in a second. I have some exercises that you can do. Yeah, Brittany says avoid missed tasks and ensure completion isn't contingent on one person or department. Yeah, maximize performance and wellness. No more revenue slippage. Cool. Good stuff, everyone. I'll give you guys about maybe 30, 45 seconds. Okay, early, pay out less money on fines for late POs. Super simple. Love it. This, by the way, this document, you guys, this becomes a working, breathing, living document that you update and add stuff to. As you learn things about your prospect, you add it to this messaging matrix. And this just helps you attain mastery. Like you should be an absolute master at understanding your prospect's world. This is the stuff that builds credibility in the sales context. Good stuff, Daniela. Okay. I want to end on one thing here, and then we'll have a couple minutes. Manuel, yeah, absolutely. You can use this for cold calling. I don't know if you missed that part earlier. These priority statements, like these become part of the opener in the cold call. That becomes part of the cold call. And there's like a little kind of talk track template that you can use down here. It's on page 13, where you can kind of fill in the blank and see an example of what that looks like. No, all good, Manuel. So if you kind of struggled with this exercise today, or you're looking to kind of, for lack of a better term, beef up what you came up with, what you want to do is a couple things. Your sales calls, if you are running sales calls, this is the best way to get this information. Yeah, and for those of you that hopped in, let me drop this document in the chat one more time so that you guys have it if you didn't grab it. Yeah, go ahead and make a copy there. Okay, your sales calls. So if you're an account executive or someone actually running the sales calls, one of the big things that I love asking, if you're unsure about what their priorities are, and let's be real, you guys, you should know what your typical priorities are for a prospect. But if you're just getting started and you haven't spoken with a lot of prospects yet, and you don't really have a ways to get that information, like it doesn't hurt to ask. And that sounds something like, hey, before we get started today, I'm sure you have a dozen different things that you're working on right now. I want to make sure today is a good use of your time. Can you share the top like 1 or 2 priorities or goals you have over the next 6 to 12 months that might relate most with what we're covering today? And then you are going to write down those things word for word. That becomes the language for your cold outreach. That becomes the language for future sales calls, etc. Sales call recordings are a great place to get this information too. It's probably the best place. When I start working with a client for the first time, I have them share sales calls with me. I want to listen to recordings of them doing calls with these personas, and I pick out little tidbits of information around what their priorities are, what their problems are, why they're talking, etc. If you're an SDR or BDR, listen to recordings of your sales reps and account executives doing those calls. Number 3, talk to top performers at your company. So who are the top 2 or 3 reps? Like you could pick their brain a little bit on this and get their help to fill it out. Review sites are pretty clutch too. So if you sell software, especially, there's a lot of review sites. You can look at reviews for your solution or competing solutions on what people like and what they don't like and all that kind of stuff. You could look at case studies, ebooks, could be from your competitors as well. This one's a little tough to pull off, but customer interviews. So these are some good questions that you can ask in customer interviews to really get a lot of the language that we've been talking about today. Depends on the industry, but your prospects' LinkedIn profiles can be really good to check out as well. And then industry resources. One of the things that I really like to do when I'm doing research for a customer is I'll look and see what the top conferences are in their industry, and I'll look to see what the specific topics of the individual talks in those conferences are. So we got a couple minutes left. I'd love to do 2 things. One, if you have a question, let me know in the Q&A section. Let me know what those questions are, and I'll try to answer as many of them as possible. And then the second thing is, before you take off, what I would love to hear too is like, what was your biggest takeaway from today? Let me know in the chat. Let me know what was your biggest takeaway today. I'll start answering some questions here. So this was anonymous, but someone asked, if you sell several products into a few different verticals, would you develop a matrix for each buying persona in each segment and product? The cool thing is that you don't need to develop one for each product. You need to develop one for each persona. And then what you might need to do is tailor that persona to the specific industry. Because if you sell multiple products into the same persona, each of those products should align with a priority. So you don't need to create one for each product that you have. It's really persona. And if you're selling across different industry verticals and enterprise, let's say, you're going to need to do this one across the different industry verticals. My suggestion would be start with 2. You don't need to do them all at once. Start with the top 2 that are going to be most helpful. Cool. So we got that. We already talked about the best way to find this information. Daniela asks, lawyers don't like to pick up the call. They're really busy. Would you recommend calling at night with the goal of leaving a voicemail? I think, Daniela, the big thing that I would think about is whatever you do needs to be multi-channel. It needs to be phone plus email plus social. So when you call, just because a prospect doesn't pick up the phone doesn't mean that calling isn't effective. 2 reasons why you should leave voicemails. 1, Gong did a big study. They showed that reps that consistently leave voicemails through the sequences have a reply rate that will 2x. It will be twice as much as the average reply rate. The other thing, too, is that the prospect is about 25% more likely to pick up the second, third, fourth time you call them if you leave a voicemail in the first one. So I'm going to point them to the email. When I leave a voicemail, I'm going to say, I just sent you an email and the subject line is XYZ. Right? So that's something that you can do there. Cool. I'm just looking through the chat here. Yeah, the big takeaways, restructure our messaging to target our customers' priorities. Yeah. Yeah, Megan said the biggest takeaway is the comparison of all the value props and how similar they are. I'd recommend doing this for your company and for your competitors. Put them onto a slide like that and just put them all next to each other and show your sales leaders. Or show your team if you're a sales leader and say, hey, if we're talking like this with prospects, we sound the same. A really, really good thing to do. Yeah, David says, love the rigor around quarterly updates. Absolutely. You guys, this was super awesome. Thanks for spending time with me today. If you are a sales leader or enablement leader and you're looking for help implementing some of this stuff with your team, we've worked with companies like Gong, Shopify, Zoom, all of the kind of fastest growing software companies out there. We work with professional services companies as well. If you want help, reach out to us. You guys have my email if you signed up. It's jason@outboundsquad.com. Let me know if you want some help in getting your team to apply some of this stuff and land more meetings and that sort of stuff. And that's all I got for you guys today. We'll send in a recording out afterwards. See ya. Have a good one, everyone. Later.